Homage to the Buddha, homage to the Dharma, homage to the Sangha. One of the items, ceremonial items, that a monk is given at the time of their transmission ceremony is a sword of Buddha's wisdom, called in Japanese a kyosak. Whilst you see Manjusri holding the sword of Buddha's wisdom upright and pointing to the ceiling, we only carry this that way. The blunt part of the sword pointing down, and it's used either that way when, I won't go into when, but it's a ceremonious thing that the head novice does, and also when we walk along the seated monks and sometimes seated lay people, we hold it horizontally like that. I see it more as an item of compassion, and less of in the way that Manjusri wields his sword, flaming sword. And of course, what we see with Manjusri is, and observe, is something that's pointing back to ourselves, and an aspect that we'll focus on today, or I'll focus on today, which is wisdom. In Soto Zen, we tend to focus on Kuan Yin, the aspect of compassion, Kanzeon, Avalokiteshvara. However, we could just as easily have focused more extensively on Manjusri. Because compassion without wisdom is a bit one-sided, to say the very least. In actual fact, there is usually the statues of Manjusri sat on a lion, and on the other side of the altar, which we've had as the setup probably for years, with Samantabhadra, Bodhisattva of the active side of love, sat on an elephant. So let's call this Manjusri month, and endeavour to talk about the aspects of Manjusri, not only what I want to focus on, which is transcendent wisdom, as I mentioned in the dedication. Which is the reason that the symbol of Manjusri holding a scripture, which is the Parashanya Paramita, or the scripture of great wisdom, in his left hand, and it's balanced by the sword in the right hand. In order to know, touch, encounter transcendent wisdom, one needs to have vigilance, application, and bodhicitta or bodhicitta, which is what was in the litany. And I thought, if we have the litany, I'm going to end up having to talk about bodhicitta or citta, and so we didn't read it. But it's there nonetheless. That's the aspect of dedication and application and vigour in our practice. Application of vigour and application to what exactly? Well, the sword tells it, and the Elfa tree, very lovely, beautifully sung, speaks of cutting through, I think it talks about cutting through the defiling passions, that's one way of putting it, typically listed as greed, hungering, tanha actually, that's what greed is used in Sanskrit, which is thirsting. You know, we all have a desire for a good lunch and a good walk or whatever. Greed and desire arise, but it's the thirsting that is the, quote, defiling passion that we have to sit still on ourselves. The lion it represents actually the sitting still within our passions, our self. So to me, the tiger or the beast has been sat still with. Hatred or anger, the next one in the three. Again, they arise, and we have to sit still and do our very best not to indulge them. And there's the indulging of body, speech and mind. I think sometimes words slip out when you wish they hadn't. Actions happen, so we can tackle the karma on that level, and our mind's a little bit more difficult to deal with. That's all our own, really. Greed, hate or anger, and delusion. Typically we talk about the sword of Buddha's wisdom, cutting through delusion. And I think that's very apt, the delusion being cut through with vigour. So what's delusion? Basically, I could say this morning of mistaking appearances for reality, and to cut through delusion, which one endeavours when one sits and sees one's mind and body caught up in whatever it is that it's caught up with, and the point, the intention, the wish. Intention is to sit still on our beast, so to speak, and sink below the waves. Here I'm using lots of metaphors. Sit within and below the waves. Actually, often talk about sinking below the waves, using the simile or metaphor, whichever it is, of the ocean, to find the stillness below and beneath, within. And it takes application to just sit still and allow one's senses to be open and receptive, including open and receptive to one's own mind and body. The soundscape, both the outward soundscape, the birds singing. At the moment, for me too, is my own voice, and sit below that, and to actually hear what is going on externally and internally, which includes your own voice when you sit. or your own imaging when you sit. Some people are more image-oriented, some more wordy oriented. All subject to anicca or change. So I describe this as the ongoing flowing that we sit within. The ongoing flowing, another word would be anicca, changeableness, impermanence. Let's say thank goodness for impermanence. Because as a king asked some words of wisdom to be inscribed inside his ring, he had the words, "This too will change," inscribed inside his ring. Good to remember when you're stuck in a hole. This too will change. So, having cut through, identified, seen, acknowledged the particular karma that we carry, our propensities, our known propensities, and there's those that we know about, and those that maybe we ignore for a little bit of self-protection and comfort. So ignorance is both not knowing and ignoring, which adds up to what we're talking about now of delusion, self-delusion. Often manifesting for people of saying one thing and doing another. So their words don't match up to their actions. Not a matter of judgment, just simply that you may notice it in others and in yourself too. So transcendent wisdom, what Reverend Master Daisui would often describe, our former head of the order, late head of the order, as wise discernment. I liked how he talked about that. Wise discernment. Well, there's the wisdom that we all possess to be able to weigh things up within the world of the opposites, and using our intelligence and native wisdom that we all are imbued with. And then there's wise discernment, which is the sinking between or underneath the waves of our minds, the waves of what we call the opposites, the right and the wrong, the just and the unjust. And there's people that will have very strong views, maybe coming in your direction, as to the right and the wrong. However, it's our duty to ourselves and to Manjusri and the Buddha to have the integrity to really come to a point of action that we all have done our very best to sink below the waves of influence as well as disturbance, to do the best we can to do that which is good. Very difficult. Requires a lot of vigour and application. And taking refuge in other people's wise discernment. And sometimes we're so action-oriented, sometimes it's not a matter of what do we do or what do we don't do, but sink below doing too. I think that's where we go to when we sit very still, because we're not doing anything when we sit, apart from applying ourselves to sinking below the waves. I rather favour that this morning. That metaphor. I think you may all have seen the video of the little installation of the Jesus statue in our growing Jesus garden, dedicated to Reverend Sido, who got it going all those years ago, and where we have in the future possibilities for people to do, both men and women, to do ceremonies dedicated to maybe a stillborn child or a child that has not gone to term. So it'll be our Jizo garden, which is well within the Soto Zen tradition, in particular Japan. And we're going to do a rather extended dedication to the garden. When is it that you're coming, Duncan? Is it?
I think 3rd.
3rd of August. Yes, on the 3rd of August. It's a Saturday when the Birmingham group come. Anybody who's living locally, please come along. We'll figure out when that will be, what time it'll be, and invite everybody along. So thank you very much for coming, this crowd of you online. Is there still a crowd online, Chris? Yeah? And thank you very much.